Hello and welcome to the 1912 Exiles podcast, the original, the biggest, the best Newport County podcast made by the fans for the fans. We're brought to you by the Terrace Cymru podcast network and in association with the wonderful team at the Riverside Sports Bar in Newport, the city's home for live sport. I'm Rhys, your host for today, and I'm joined by Alfie and Ian. And now the dust has settled on the final day drama, we're going to reflect on the course of last season. So diving right in, looking at the season as a whole, obviously going back to our pre-season predictions, we were on the whole pretty pessimistic. What did you make of it? Alfie, we'll come to you first.
Yeah, going into the season, well, I was the highest, thinking that we were going to finish 15th. Uh, yeah, going into it, I was quite confident that the players we'd signed the season before, who had a year under their belt, would grow into sort of decent League Two players. I was wrong on a few of them, and a few of them took until Fuchs came in to start improving. But no, it was just a horrible, horrible season, which the club was going backwards, and I was panicking, and just I thought it was over. Um, I Previous years I've never really like taken to commenting on social media posts, but I found myself like stating my own opinion on everything, match reports, mistakes, and then the lack of performances had me writing essays about everything on social media. When we played Cheltenham in October at home and we lost when they were bottom of the league, that was when I accepted we were down. Um, when we sacked David Hughes and Fuchs came in, I thought this is it. It's just another experiment, and we're gonna go. But it took him a while to convince me. But ultimately, he got us the points, and we desperately needed them, and he did the job. It wasn't until the Oldham game, which was what the second to last game of the season, where I was fully on the Fuchs train. Um, it was the first time in a few years where I'd felt passionate about the club again. Um, and then obviously when we were 1-0 down at Barrow, I was thinking get him gone. Like he's not good enough, but somehow we got over the line and finished where we did, and we looked better than the teams who had been around us all season. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, you awakened a repressed memory there of how bad our written media articles were for a while. There was a dreadful, the worst one I think was around the Walsall game where there was a tenuous Peaky Blinders war link. Um, just having that around Armistice Day was in really poor taste, in my opinion. Um, but I was pretty close for most of the season with my prediction. I went for 22nd. Me and Jamie both did. And like you say, it was horrible to watch for most of the year. I think that Barrow game was like our season in a microcosm, where we were absolutely dreadful in the first half, like almost unwatchable. And then we turned it around at half time and kind of slowly clawed our way back into it and clinched it right at the death. And that's essentially what happened to the rest of the season. Um, we were in the bottom two from September until March. So, that's the right time to pull yourself out of the bottom two. But, that's how bad we were for pretty much all but the first month and the last month of the season. We were in the bottom two. There was the turnaround, like you said, under Fuchs. We weren't perfect. We still looked pretty shaky defensively. Um, we finished this year with fewer points, fewer goals scored, and more conceded than the previous season, despite finishing 20th rather than 22nd. So I think without change, we're in for another tough season next year. Ian, what did you make of the season on a kind of big picture scale?
Yeah, it was really challenging, I think, for me. Obviously, as you know, I'm mostly picking up spurious away games. There was a lot of very difficult watches, a lot of those. Um, and it sort of continued. We've had a difficult few years, haven't we? It continued the difficulty we had last year, which was pretty awful to watch, as was the year before that, as was the year before that to a certain extent. So it's been, certainly for those of us who are mostly aways, it's been very thin gruel. The football's been, I'm not, we got over the line, and we'll come on to talk about that. Am I on the Fuchs train? I'm not sure I am. We might come on to talk about that later. But all credit, we did get over the line. I think it's a very interesting point you're raising there, Rhys. And I've been thinking about this a lot. Are we better this year or worse than last year? Do you know what I mean? Like, we finished higher, but as you've said, points were worse, goals conceded are worse. There's a lot of the stats saying actually we're a worse team this year than we were last year. And last year we got out of the mire by the skin of our teeth. And it's been a really, even obviously there's been some exciting games towards the end of the season, but it's been very difficult watching, hasn't it? We create little, we make mistakes all the time. And certainly a lot of the games I've seen, you walk into the ground, we're often 1-0 down in the first 10 minutes, and you would never any hope of ever coming back from those. I think I could be wrong here, but both the Barrow game and the Oldham game, possibly the only games we came back to win from coming from behind, which is great. But most of the season, you pretty much knew as soon as you went one down, that was it. So yeah, it's been a very, very difficult season on top of some other very difficult seasons. So as you said, Rhys, I'm sure we'll come on to talk about it. There needs to be a change if possible in the playing personnel and how we go about doing that. I think it's going to be interesting. So yeah, tough season, finished on a high, but I think you commented, Rhys, all the celebrations that were going on with players in front of the away end and all. Yeah, let's celebrate, but let's be realistic about what we're celebrating here, which is absolute survival by the skin of our teeth. Because 15 minutes before that celebration, we were down. So it's been tough.
But in fairness, Fuchs did say in his post-match press conference after the Barrow game, he said we need to look at this season as a whole to make sure we're not back in this position again. I think one of the biggest issues we've suffered from this season is when we concede one goal, the amount of times we then immediately concede a second. And that is just a killer. If you can't be that fragile, I don't know whether it's a confidence thing or a concentration thing, but there was a pattern. It happened over and over again. I think it was around 12, 13 times over the 46 game season. That's not just a coincidence at that point. That's an issue.
Yeah, totally. And often they were the same goals we were conceding at the same time. So, I remember being at Notts County, and we might talk about our inability to defend set pieces, but they scored direct from a corner. It was one of the worst bits of defending you will ever see. And 5 or 6 minutes later, they scored exactly the same goal from another corner, and you were just like, that compounded everything that I've seen going wrong. Can't defend a set piece, give one away, give two away. So you're right. We're not coming back from that, are we? We're just not coming back. And
No,
that
and
has been an issue and a recurring theme.
Our attack was fairly toothless until the last month of the season. So that once you're 1 or 2 goals behind, for most of the year we knew we were done at that point. So we've had the majority of last season under Fuchs. Do you think he'll be back next year? Do you think there's going to be kind of an evolution of our style with a full transfer window behind him? I can chuck that over to you first if you want, Ian, or I can let Alfie
I'll
take
the Fuchs. I'll take the Fuchs question because I'm completely split on this, and I've been thinking about this, and I've been chatting to a couple of people about this. I don't know where I am with Fuchs. I'll be honest with you, and this sounds really churlish after what he's we undoubtedly improved under Fuchs. The stats say that he kept us up. So all kudos to Fuchs, maybe. Maybe he knew exactly what he was doing. He had a clear plan. He got the best out of the players, happy days. But part of me watching on was like we were consistently setting up in very odd formations at times. Barrow being a brilliant example. What on earth was going on? Notts County a couple of weeks before, we happened to change the formation completely. There were some odd formation choices. We had an absolute. We kept sort of sticking with his zonal marking at corners and completely, letting in goals that we could all see coming a mile off. We, we're still, conceding those 2 goals as we've talked about. So was Fuchs, and Napoleon said what you need is lucky generals. What was Fuchs lucky that Bobby Camwell woke up for the last 2 games? I'm really unclear about it because we often, I think, opposing managers, when I was watching this, would tactically change the game. We didn't respond to that. That was an issue in the Dave Hughes as well, and potentially in the Nelson. It felt, we put out a winning team one week, and the next week we put about a completely different team out, or different formation out. So was he just lucky? Did he have? I mean, he had better players for the second half of the season. If Dave Hughes had those players, would we even have been in this position? So I'm really unclear on Fuchs, and I'm split down the middle. I don't actually want to toss him out with the bathwater, because I think we don't want to be doing that. I'm a big believer, as you know. Go back to the Roby situation. We need to give people time. It is his first managerial position. I'm hoping, as he was saying, he wants to look at the season as a whole. I hope he also has the humility to look at his own performance and think about, well, what did he get right and wrong? And I think if he's brave enough to do that, and honest enough to do that, and intelligent enough to do that, hopefully he can improve as well. And if he can improve as well, he can improve with us. And so I would stick with him, but I'm not like, oh, everything's rosy in the Fuchs garden.
Cool. Alfie, what about you? What did you make of the Fuchs era?
Yeah, I think once the novelty of he's a ex-Premier League winner, FA Cup winner, captain in his country wore off, I think I think he may have realised that if I don't get them out of this position, I might not have another chance, sort of thing, at this high level. It's his first job. A lot of managers start from the bottom, and he probably got this job on his name and his credentials in his career. He's been linked with Leicester, which is another big jump, but he is a Leicester legend. I would like to see him stay, have a transfer window, see how it goes. But if he did go to Leicester, I can only wish him the best. He came here to keep us up, and he did the job. Even if we did look terrible, and the thing is with me, whenever new managers come in, they've played football. You always think, like when Graham Coughlin came in, a defender. We looked okay when he first came in. Under Fuchs, as a defender, especially at left back, we looked awful. Probably worse than we ever have. Probably worse than like Lee Baker back in the conference days. Like it was that bad. Um, but yeah, his signings, I'd say, probably kept us up. Like your experienced pros in like Biggins and Sprangler. Um, Ben Lloyd had his loan extended, which at the time, I think the majority of us were thinking he may as well go back. But he improved massively, and I would potentially like to see him back here again next season. Apoku, again, he had his loan extended. He was our top goal scorer. Um, Delaney, he looked okay, not up to the levels as his first spell, but he scored at Salford, which helped us win the game. Kroll, I think it took him a few games to get up to speed, but he has in the last few games he looked like the striker we had been missing since like Amond, but we just needed to score the goals like Hodge next season. But yeah, transfer party wise, I think we have to go away from this like they have to be local, they have to be under 28. We need the players 28 and over, 100 plus professional EFL games because that is what kept us up this year with Biggins, Sven, and Ryan Delaney.
Yeah, I think you've all made good points, and I broadly agree with most of it. I think he deserves another go, because it was quite clearly an improvement. Under Hughes, we were looking at probably a record worse finish in League Two on like a points per game basis. Um, but we were a lot better under Fuchs. Obviously, we picked up those late wins in the season. Um, and like we said before, we weren't great in some of those games that we won. But at Barrow, admittedly, we got it wrong at the start, but he did make changes. So maybe that's a sign of him growing, like you said, Ian. Yeah, so I think, like you said there, Alfie, the January signings made a big difference. You think of Biggins, Sprangler, Delaney, Kroll. Um, they made a big difference. Less so, kind of Jarvis came in last couple of games. Jameson and Tan didn't really have an impact, but Jameson's coming back next season. One thing that did concern me slightly, and Ian touched on it about the zonal marking, but Fuchs maintained in a lot of his press conferences that we were good at defending set pieces. And I looked this up yesterday, and we conceded 28 goals from set pieces. Um, that's the most in the league, or joint most, along with Morecambe. So that's something that we really need to kind of address. We conceded 49 goals under Fuchs and scored 33. So, we're still in his 30 games. So we're still shipping quite a lot of goals.
I think one thing that we should say positively about Fuchs is I think that the players wanted to play for him, I think was clear. And I think that's really positive. So even though we were struggling at Barrow and some of the other games, the vast majority of the players seem to be on his side. I think that's a really positive thing. I also think he was very good at, he cleared out, Whitmore, who some of the fans liked quite a bit, was clearly a bit of a negative influence, got rid of him straight away, didn't he? I think the same with Garner. He's clearly saying, no, mate, you're out. I quite like that as well. So I think he's setting standards. And it's building culture in any organization and high standards, is a difficult thing. It takes time, doesn't it, to do that? And I get the feeling that he has that. I think he's quietly spoken, which I quite like. He's not a ranter. He's not a ranter and raver on the touch lines. I think he's getting his points across to the players, and he's working with what he's got. And I think he's trying to build that culture, and I'm positive about that. The difficulty is he's going to have to probably do it with 15 or 16 new players come the start of the season and start again. But hopefully, I want him to stay on, despite what some of the reservations I've got, because I think let's try and build some continuity. Let's try and allow him to build the culture that he wants, allow him to have some influence and to do that review of what went wrong last season so that he can try and correct that. I mean, in doing that, hopefully he'll improve as a manager and we'll improve as a club. And I'm up for that. I'm up for that journey, for want of a better term. I think he's too early for Leicester. I hear what Alfie's saying. I'd be amazed if he goes this year. I think he has to have another season with us and push us up the table a bit to then move into League One. But it's football. Who knows?
I am going to stake this out there that the season after next, Leicester are going to be with us in League Two anyway. So he'll just be at the same standard if he moves to Leicester then.
Oh, controversial.
As an aside from County Chat, but Leicester have got a massive budget. The problem they had last season, one of the problems was that they didn't have any relegation wage drop clauses. So they've got all these players on Premier League wages on a League One income. King Power have basically said the money tap has been shut off. So Leicester could be, they've got to sell the players that they've got. Everyone knows they're going to be at cut price deals because they can't afford to keep them. I think Leicester could be in real trouble next season. I could be wrong, but That's my opinion. Anyway, coming back on, we've kind of alluded to it already, but next season the retained and released list came out a couple of days ago. Any great surprises in there? How do you think we're set for next season? Alfie, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, not shocked at all, to be honest. Liam Shepherd came here, and I remember putting on social media if he stayed fit, he would probably win the sign into the summer for us. But unfortunately, injuries hit. He would play maybe 3 games, and then we wouldn't see him for 2 or 3. I wanted it to work out for CBR, as you could tell he cared for the club. Um, despite him not scoring loads, you could really see a change in his leadership, like especially with the younger players. And he was great with the younger generation as well, and especially my 6-year-old niece, who always had a wave from Courtney when she was at games. But he would always be signing autographs when the team were doing their lap, and I think, yeah, just who else got released? It's been a few days since I read it. Glennon, yeah, just not too fussed. I think Tom Davis is probably the better one, and I'm glad we've got him under contract. And then speaking of players who are in talks, I hope we can keep Matt Baker and Bobby. I think they both will move on. But if there was one more likely to stay, I think it'd be Bobby, especially if Matt Baker wants to play for Wales in his career, doesn't want to be hanging around relegation battles in League Two. But yeah, big rebuild needed over the summer. With the rumor mill already going, could be a long summer of us being linked with every ex-player we've ever had.
Yeah, I joked yesterday that so many of the Mike Flynn team players have been released that he's going to come out of managerial retirement and get the band back together. So just to recap, for those who have not seen the release list, we have let Anthony Glennon go, Liam Shepherd, Jaden Warner, Nelson Sanker, Jack Norris, Riley Lonergan, and CBR. We've got discussions ongoing with Cam Evans, Matt Baker, Kieran Brennan, Keenan Patton, Bobby Camwer, and Michael Spellman. We've put club options exercised on Joe Thomas, Tom Davis, and Moses Alexander Walker. And in what's probably the most surprising thing is that we've publicly stated that Matt Smith and Jed Garner are both available for transfer, which is normally something that just happens behind closed doors. So it's maybe slightly unusual that we've just made that public commitment that they're available. I'm not massively surprised. Like you say, in who we're letting go. We've got 8 players, I think, under contract for next season. No, 9, including Moses, who's barely played in League Two and barely played at National League level last year. So massive rebuild. I'd love us to keep Baker or Camwer, but I think they're both going to get better offers at the table. I think, like we mentioned earlier, Biggins and Sprangler made such a difference to our midfield when they came in January. Biggins has been released by Shrewsbury. I've not seen about Sprangler, but that if they're available, that has to be a priority conversation to be having with them. Ian, I'm going to chuck it over to you. What do you make of kind of how we're set for next season?
Well, we're in a very difficult position. I think I think League Two next year is going to be one of the hardest League Twos we've seen for a long time. Most of the deadwood is gone. Rochdale and York were coming up are miles stronger than, for example, Barrow and Harrogate who've gone. So it's going to be really tough. So we need a team that can compete at a League Two level. Otherwise, it's going to be a very, very difficult season. I am surprised by some of the things, not massively, like having a conversation about re-signing Keenan Patton. I mean, I know he's been injured, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure he's the solution to any of our problems. Maybe he is. Is that a wage we want to be spending there? I'm not sure about that. Moses Alexander-Walker, as you said, he hasn't been pulling up trees at the leagues below us, has he? So maybe he can develop, but I'm slightly surprised we're going down that road. And I guess the one for me, I'm a bit surprised. I know Joe Thomas works hard. I know he scored a great goal against Harrogate, was it? But he looks wildly off it to me, as a League Two standard. So I wouldn't be giving him an option personally. And I think we're struggling when we look at who we've got under contract, who would actually be a first team player. I Jenkins, Crowell, maybe Davis. That's probably all I've got.
I'd say
So I've got
Jordan Wright has earned. I think he's a League Two standard keeper. He makes
he
mistakes.
terrifies me. He terrifies me, Rhys, watching him. He terrifies me as a like you say, he might be able to improve. He's still at a reasonable age, but whenever the ball goes into the box, which surely is the keeper's aim, we look, it doesn't look to me like the defenders trust him, and he also is terrible with his feet. So he does make the odd good save, no doubt about it. And obviously, that penalty save at Barrow was the absolute changing point in that game. And we'll have to keep him, because I think when we're talking about who we can bring in for what wages and all the rest of it, he is going to start as number one. I've got no doubt about that. But that makes me pretty nervous. So I think he will start. Then we've got Davis. Then we got Crowell. Then we got Jenkins. There's nobody else for me that we've got who's first team standard. So there's a massive rebuild needed. Massive. I really hope that both Fuchs doing his look back, but I hope that owner Jenkins as well, and whatever the transfer committee is, they've had a couple of seasons at this now. They've struggled every year. I really hope that they all look at themselves and think about the lessons that we need to learn about this, about what does a League Two squad look like for the budget that we have. As Alfie said, you're going to have a core of experience in there. Then you can have some young players. Then you can have some good loans. But that mix is absolutely critical in it, and I don't think we've got the mix right over the last couple of seasons. So I hope we look at that.
Bad at dealing with crosses, bad with his feet, but a good shot stopper. Are you sure you're not talking about Joe Day? Because those are all the criticisms that were leveled at Joe.
He doesn't look as good as Joe Day, I would say, because he also does make some utter howlers as well. Like, look. Like, I'm sure he's a nice lad, but like, he will be our keeper next year. I have no doubt about that. We've got two keepers under contract now because we've got McDonald as well. So we're not going to change that, because we can't with the budget we've got. We have to use the budget elsewhere, don't we? So let's get some better defenders in front of him, and maybe that'll help.
I mean, given the defenders and how poor we've been at set pieces, maybe it's he didn't have confidence in his defence with balls into the box.
That's a fair comment.
If you had a more authoritative back line, he may not be as nervy.
That's
an interesting point about the league next season as well, actually, because I think it's going to be a fairly level playing field for a lot of you've got the likes of MK Dons, Cambridge, and possibly Notts County going up. So those are three, and maybe Salford if Notts County don't go up. You've got three of the wealthiest teams in the league going up, and then you've maybe got a bit more of a level. We're still going to be one of the smallest budgets, but those real big spenders of when we talked to Watsy right at the back of the start of the season, you got MK Dons, up there in the 8-9 million range compared to our 1.5 million. There might not be that much of a difference between top and bottom in terms of wages. So it'll be really interesting where we go from there. And like you say, absolutely massive task on our hands to rebuild. I agree that there's not really many League Two caliber players. I think I think Matt Smith and Garner are probably two of our highest paid players as well. So getting them off the books would free up a significant chunk of our wages, I'd imagine.
Can we get them off the books? I think it's going to be the challenge.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? And that's maybe what makes it strange to publicly announce they're available for transfer, because clubs can kind of lowball us. They know we want rid of them. So it's not like we're going to get a fee for them. Basically, it's, can we either get them off the wage book completely or convince someone to take them on loan to absorb some of the wages? But we desperately, I think, we need reinforcements everywhere. We don't really have a midfielder on the books. So that's probably a priority. We didn't score enough goals last season and we conceded too many. So apart from needing players in
Every
defense,
position.
midfield, and attack, we're set all right.
But I'm
Yeah.
hoping, like trying to flip that on its positive. I might be clutching at straws here. You've got to hope that the powers that be, alongside Fuchs, have been doing some thinking and doing some planning, right? So they presumably had a plan for if we stay up, or presumably had a plan for if we go down, right? I would hope. I mean, that's what surely that's what they're doing, right? So they must have an idea of how they're going to go about this and how they can do it slightly differently, because otherwise it's madness if they suddenly think like us sitting here today. Oh, what are we going to do? I mean, they must have some thoughts about this.
And the counter to my maybe flippant point is, of those we're releasing, would any of them move the needle either? I don't think
No,
any of them would. So
no. It's clean slate, isn't it? It's clean slate, and it's Fuchs and Jenkins to say, right, we've got a clean slate. This is a budget, right? Let's see what you can build.
And as much
That's
as
where we are.
I'd like to keep Camwa, but he was rubbish for the majority of the season. That period between August and March, he was an absolute passenger. But he's a match winner, which is ridiculous. Like that stat that he scored 5 goals, 4 of them were match winners, and the fifth was the first goal against Harrogate. No, first goal against Oldham. Sorry.
Yeah.
So
he said a very interesting thing when he was being interviewed after both the Oldham game and the Barrow game, and he said, I'm here for the big games. It's like, brilliant, Bobby. But there's 40 odd other games you need to turn up for. So that we need to, if he stays, we need Fuchs to somehow convince him that you can't turn up for 3 games a season. You've got to play for 30 odd games a season, and then we'd be laughing, wouldn't we? And we could sell him for a load of money.
yeah, exactly. We asked listeners what they thought was the missing piece of the county jigsaw, and a fairly unanimous clamour was the return of the Biggin Sprangler axis. There was lots of suggestions for double-digit or 15-goal a season strikers. One suggestion was someone who can take a penalty, which would be good. And I think what is actually quite important as well is off the field investment. So if we can get another investor on board, and I think that is more likely now that we've stayed up, and maybe that's why we had that discussion with the trust about a share issue. Maybe those potential investors were keeping their powder dry to see how the end of the season panned out, and I hope we now get maybe a bit of a cash injection now that we've kind of secured survival for another season. So that is it for our kind of look back over the season. We're gonna, as always, move on to shout outs and beefs. I'm gonna start with you, Ian.
Well, I think that Alfie has got my shout out, so I'm going to leave that to Alfie, really. I guess, in a way, my shout out is I think the support held up really well this year.
Absolutely agree.
We were pretty dire. Do you know what I mean? We were pretty dire, and yet, the support did generally hold up, and yeah, of course there was frustrations and all the rest of it. But they got behind, they got behind the team as much as they could do with all of the shambles that was going on in front of them.
Big
You know,
attendances the last two home games.
yeah,
And I think that's probably massive.
yeah, the way support held up. I mean, I said on my match diary at Barrow, you couldn't ask for any more. There was they've sold out every ticket. I know loads of people who wanted to come who couldn't get in. You couldn't ask for more than that. It's a 5.5 hour trip from Newport to watch basically the two worst teams in the football league battle it out for survival. So you know what? Fair play to the supporters. To be fair, I think they did. All the different sections we've got, it held up well. So my shout out is to them, I guess. Really, beefs. I wasn't prepared for this meeting, so beefs. I guess my beef probably. I'm gonna go Fuchsian on the beef. When he kept saying after we kept watching us concede from set pieces, he kept saying in interviews afterwards that we've been really good at set pieces all season, and I was like, what are you watching? Now, obviously the psychology of this, he might be just going, I can't throw my players under the bus. I get all that, but it was very surreal to watch us concede goal after goal after goal from set pieces. And every time afterwards, he said, "Oh, I was a bit of a surprise at because we're really good at set pieces. He's been good at set pieces all season." I'm like, "What are you watching, Christian? What are you watching? We're rubbish at them." So yeah, my beef was that, I guess, our inability to defend a set piece, and then for Fuchs to actually admit that we couldn't defend set pieces. So I'll go with that. Off the top of my head, there's me ones.
Would have been nice if we could have scored a penalty as well.
Yeah.
There must be a professional footballer somewhere. And also maybe my beef is that he kept on letting Biggins take set pieces when his set piece delivery is absolutely rubbish. Just everything overhit every time. Alfie, I'll jump over to you because you stole Ian's shout out, so I'll let you get that in.
Yeah, as I was writing them on the notes, Ian messaged saying the same sort of idea. So I thought I'll get it down before. No, mine. I think I gave her a shout out a few episodes ago, but just to Nicola, the photographer, just for being the constant, like, just always there. As I said before, always put a smile on people's faces, always taking pictures. Never getting one of me, which I always try and hide. But on top of that, for what she did for with Ollie's order of service, taking it to every game, since after his funeral in March, he would have loved that last day. I can just picture him putting on social media that I think it was 81 or 82 different outcomes, and he would have broken them every single one down and had some sort of fact about them all. And I'm just glad. I'm glad we stayed up, but I'm more glad we did it for him. So yeah, and then no beef. I want to end it on a bit of a positive note.
Yeah, and on that point as well about Ollie, so I give a big shout out to the guys that Ollie worked with, along with County ambassador Mark O'Brien and former player Scott Bennett, who've been taken in a 1,047-mile cycling challenge this week, raising money for County and the community in Ollie's memory. So big shout out to them. And my other shout out, which I think is fitting to end the season review pod, is to the podcast crew. So as you know, I'm only a small part of the pod. I don't contribute anywhere near as much as most of the others. We've produced 43 episodes since our season preview this year. So a massive thank you to all of the pod crew, all of the guests, and all of you lovely listeners for being part of the 1912 Exiles community this season. Hopefully we have much more to cheer about next season than this one. But massive thank you. So rest assured, we'll continue to bring you updates throughout the summer, and as usual, we will work on some special episodes, maybe get some guests in. So keep your eyes peeled. But until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, and most of all, keep it county.